The Matrix Resurrections is the fourth main entry in the Matrix franchise, coming nearly 20 years after the original trilogy concluded with Matrix Revolutions. Lana Wachowski returns to write and direct this Matrix entry without her sister Lily for the first time. Warner Brothers had been planning a complete reboot of the franchise a few years ago without the involvement of the Wachowskis, which I think would have been a huge mistake, as this is a franchise so personally imbued to the Wachowskis as filmmakers, and of course the Keanu Reeves and Carrie-Anne Moss as Neo and Trinity. I will say that if you have been looking forward to this new film, absolutely go in blind. The less you know, the better your experience will be, as the trailers both have and haven't given much away. Additionally, I'd highly recommend rewatching the original Matrix trilogy before seeing Resurrections. There are many details from the sequels that even I'd forgotten, just as I tend to rewatch the first Matrix movie more often, but there is a fantastic integration of the previous movies here that helps keep you in the loop with this film. That all being said, Matrix Resurrections picks up many years after the conclusion of Matrix Revolutions. Neo is living in San Francisco as a famous game designer, haunted by his most famous work. Following a past traumatic event, Neo visits the Analyst, a therapist played by Neil Patrick Harris who prescribes him blue pills whenever Neo is confronted with various triggers or episodes of deja vu, particularly when Neo encounters a woman who he believes to be Trinity. Neo eventually meets a new Morpheus who offers Neo the chance to free his mind from the Matrix with a red pill, allowing Neo to once again join the human resistance and fight a new threat facing humanity. Judging by that description, you'd be forgiven for thinking this whole film is just an updated retelling of the original Matrix movie, making this just your typical legacy sequel or reboot that everyone expects from Hollywood now. And in a way, you're absolutely right. This is a film that has such an intense passion and love for the original Matrix movie, and questions what the key ingredients were to make that film such a lightning in a bottle phenomenon. And yet this is a Matrix movie through and through, where a straightforward legacy sequel like The Force Awakens couldn't be further from what Lana Wachowski is trying to achieve here. This is the antithesis and critique of what both Hollywood and audiences have allowed legacy sequels and reboots to be. These shallow retreads of stories that we all know and love, just with new faces replacing the old ones, leading to Matrix Resurrections being incredibly self-aware of what the Matrix is, as both a film franchise and as an allegory for the trans experience. Really, the experience of watching the Matrix movies comes from their initial surface level appeal, just as these mind-bending science fiction cautionary tales, utilizing groundbreaking special effects and action scenes, while commenting on our connection to the online world, especially as we have companies now developing tech like the metaverse, where people have their entire lives online. But then there's also the trans subtext of it all. A film that at its core is about the trans experience, changing every subsequent rewatch of the Matrix movies once you're aware of how personal they are for the Wachowskis. The idea of someone living two lives, seeing someone else in their reflection, or freeing their mind to their true self, and sadly the darker parts of the experience from Lana's own personal perspective, the implications of self-harm, and where certain fight scenes take place throughout the movies. All of this feeds into the Matrix Resurrections, that has high ambitions and hopes for a world of acceptance, coexistence, and love over conflict. It can't be stressed how important it is to have Lana tell this very personal story, despite the large budget and franchise hopes from the studio. That being said, this is a film that's proudly meta, explicitly calling out studios like Warner Brothers for their obsession over reboots, and of course subverting how we as audience members play a part in these nostalgia-driven legacy sequels. Matrix Resurrections certainly isn't afraid to tempt you with nostalgia from the original trilogy, recreating and referencing scenes from the Matrix trilogy, like the Neo and Morpheus Kung Fu scene, to even the opening logo and titles using the classic green tint and score, bringing you right back to the original. But it does so with a tongue-in-cheek humour, while also asking if this regression to the comfort and warmth of nostalgia is what audiences really want from cinema. What really impressed me with The Matrix Resurrections is that it honestly does a fairly good job to make things understandable the first time through, using Jessica Henwick's bugs to reintroduce us to the world, before the greater mythology starts to seep in. I will admit that in the second half the film can get a bit heavy with exposition, as the connective tissue with the Matrix sequels becomes more apparent. Priyanka Chopra, Jonas' Sati certainly gets tasked with handling a good chunk of the exposition, which does slow the pace of the film down. I'm sure you could probably lose about 20 minutes without affecting the plot significantly, but in truth, I thought the delivery of exposition was at least a step up from Reloaded and Revolutions, and either way, numerous rewatches to fully appreciate Resurrections in full will most likely be required. Most of the performances here I found to be pretty great. It is evident that the whole cast just love being involved, especially Keanu Reeves and Carrie-Anne Moss, who deliver on that fantastic intimate chemistry between Neo and Trinity from the trilogy, where it just feels like you're being reacquainted with old friends. Neo and Trinity are brought back in this film with incredible care, just speaking to how important these characters are for a lot of people. The new cast really does a great job at finding new spins on classic characters like Morpheus and Agent Smith that feel completely respectful to Lawrence Fishburne and Hugo Weaving, and yet Yahya Abdul-Mateen II and Jonathan Groff were able to make their own interpretations of those characters feel authentic, meaningful and fresh, to the point where I'd love to see how they might be expanded upon in the future. And of course, Neil Patrick Harris as the analyst is just a treat. Every scene reveals just a little bit more about the character, with Neil Patrick Harris just chewing up every scene no matter who he's opposite. Honestly, my biggest gripe with The Matrix Resurrections comes down to the action sequences, which, while still fun and well choreographed, are just shot far too tightly and closed in to really be able to get a good sense of where everyone is and what's happening in each shot. Despite all the fun new bullet time sequences, the colourful shot composition, and the fantastic building stunt by Keanu and Carrie, I did appreciate the very vivid and warm romantic look of the film, and just how many practical sets were utilised, making the whole experience feel that bit more tangible than the other sequels. The Matrix Resurrections will be a special experience for the Matrix fans who've loved all of the films for their subtext, and connected with the franchise for what it represents. Fans of just the original Matrix may be looking for the next leap forward for the franchise, or an experience that isn't really here. It won't be for everyone, and there are certainly moments that drag the film to a halt, but the more that I think about The Matrix Resurrections, the more I find things to enjoy. And hopefully, this opens the franchise up for more stories to come from this universe. The Matrix Resurrections gets an 8 out of 10 from me. Guys, I hope you like this review. If you want to see more reviews just like this one, stay right here for your mono fix. Bye guys.